Okay, so welcome everybody. This is a Dynamics NAV Hangout for June 2014. I'm Jason Gumpert, and we've got a great panel on the line with us today. Let me just run through the list from as I see it here. So first is Andrew Good from Liberty Grove Software. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you.
We've got Greg Kopp from Archer Point. Greg, you there?
I am.
All right, cool. And of course, we also have Elliot Fishman and Jeff from Catapult in Vancouver, right?
That's right. That's right. Good morning. How are you guys?
Hey, good morning, guys. Thanks for joining. So yeah, this is gonna be a session where I'm gonna ask these guys some questions, get some input on what's happening in the Dynamics NAV space right now. We also want to hear from the audience. Hear your views. It's also a good chance to ask all these Dynamics NAV experts some questions too. So we'd certainly encourage you to use the Q&A block that you should see on the screen and pose your own questions too. I thought we'd actually start today with kind of a check-in on current events, things that are sort of happening in the NAV community right now that you think are worth noting. Before we kind of dive into some more of the big questions of the event. So, I guess one thing that it's actually been, in my view, a little bit of a slow news time for NAV in the last month or two. We're sort of in between releases. We're 5-6 months out from the next major release. So things are a little bit quiet, but I wanted to get your input on what you think is interesting out there right now. So. Greg, maybe we'll start with you. What are some of the things that you're thinking about right now?
Well, I think from just a roadmap standpoint, Crete obviously is something that we're anxiously awaiting. They're doing some interesting things with reporting, performance, continue to expand on what they're doing with PowerShell. So, I think if Microsoft holds true to their release schedule, we'll expect to see that released in the September-October timeframe, around the time for direction. So, yeah, I'd say Crete is something we're pretty focused on right now. And then, kind of in addition, would be how do we get companies upgraded to the latest release faster, cheaper, and Microsoft is investing in new tooling, which I would say realistically only helps you once you're on 2009 RTC, or really probably even more so 2013. But yeah, I'd say Crete and upgrades are big things. And then probably one final thing is just from a licensing perspective, we're just trying to make sure everybody is aware that Microsoft is eliminating the waterfall pricing tiers if people are on BRL or MBL. So with that going away, people have until the end of this month if they want to buy any additional users if they're on the previous licensing models before the price goes up.
All right, certainly an important topic there. And if I had to guess, from past discussions, I've been in on licensing topics. Probably something that folks may have a question or two on. Seems to be sort of an ongoing area of questions. Andrew, what about you? Anything in the news that has caught your eye recently?
Very similar views to Greg in terms of looking forward to the next release with the changes that are there, the continued evolution of the product now that it's hitting its stride without the classic line, and as well upgrades, how to get people from their current versions up to the most current versions in an effective manner. And that has to do with timing, pricing, and overall effort required. There are still some people that struggle to see the value, and if we can reduce the cost side of that equation, it makes it an easier process for them to consider and to go forward with.
All right. Well, Elliot and Jeff, maybe I throw the same question to you. Elliot, if you want to maybe start.
Sure.
What are you paying attention to these days?
Yeah, I mean, some of the same things as Andrew and Greg mentioned. Of course, tons of interest right now in upgrades. That's pretty much where we're focused in our client base. Lots of organizations, probably 65–75% still on a pre-2013 version, so lots of upgrade planning and really interesting questions always about because this is probably the last major upgrade before getting into more of an annual release model. There are big questions about in each case around the upgrade path, re-implementation versus straight technical upgrade, and of course because there's so much new functionality in 2013 that may replace customizations. There's lots of opportunities to move to a more standardized version of NAV and an upgrade. So lots of effort going there. And in terms of, you're right, it has been a bit of a slow news time for NAV, but I think one thing that's been really exciting for us is the volume of cloud migration happening. So pretty much every upgrade conversation that we're involved in includes a cloud strategy conversation. And not everybody's there yet, but in our client base, the vast majority are coming from an on-prem deployment. In fact, almost 100%. And I would say that at least 50–60% are now moving to some version of infrastructure as a service, Microsoft Windows Azure or various private cloud options. And so there's lots of learning taking place around how to set up those environments for high performance and to integrate with other customer applications.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, that dealing with customers kind of on a daily basis, that's the big one. Just moving to the cloud or at least a hosted infrastructure model, but also what are the deployment choices? So we've got a number of different deployment choices in 2013, and how do these things work with things like Office 365 or CRM or other services that they actually have in the cloud? A lot of discussions about can we make this work with our hosted ASP X application? And so we're starting to get into some pretty cool conversations around that for sure. And 2013 is a nice platform and nice starting point for this.
All right. Getting back to maybe the upgrade, the views on upgrades from kind of the, I guess taking off from the licensing question, the topic that Greg mentioned with some of the timelines that Microsoft put in place there. Do you expect to see? Well, first of all, where would you like to see customers being to make you kind of comfortable, to make them comfortable in not falling too far behind right now? Is it NAV 2009? Is it kind of any release of NAV 2009 right now? Is kind of the earliest point you want to be at if you're a customer to be kind of in the up-to-date range right now?
I think the challenge, Jason, is January of 2015. 2009 is no longer a supported release.
Yeah.
So at this point, I wouldn't encourage people to go to 2009. Now, we still have a few clients who, just because of change management within their organization, still want to do a two-step with the intention of going 2009 Classic, do the RTC migration, and then get to 2013. But I would say as a long-term strategy, 2009 really isn't where you want to be. We're at a point now where people have got to bite the bullet, get up to 2013. And then I would say, too, for me to feel really comfortable about where we are as an industry, as a community, I think we need to have all of our customers who are upgrading, at least within the supported life cycle, which would be 3 years, where I think the current average is probably closer to 5, even 6 in some cases. So we've got to shift the paradigm where people are staying more current. So for me, it's somewhere between 2 to 3 years is when I'll feel like we've cracked the nut and people are getting the value out of the current release on a frequent enough basis to justify their investment in the maintenance.
You mentioned some new tooling on the way. I wonder if any of you can comment on what kind of tools customers really need now to get them to make these upgrades more feasible in shorter time frames, and maybe bringing down the cost and effort and that maybe drive some reluctance in it.
Go ahead, guys.
Andrew, you see a lot of, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we're going to let you go first, Greg.
Oh, thanks.
Who wants to jump on that?
So, I mean, what we're seeing is a lot of the tooling is focused around automation, the PowerShell stuff. So it doesn't necessarily solve the challenges yet of how you merge ISVs, merge customs, and bring it forward. But at least for a lot of the manual tasks that we have to do in an upgrade, you know, Dimitri's team in Denmark, you know, they're doing some great work around automating that with scripts. So there's really, with 2013 R2, there's not much that can't be automated that is currently a manual task, except for the merge. But I think even they're probably going to look at ways to make the merge better. I mean, today, there's no specific tooling from Microsoft around merging. We all use the merge tool. And, you know, so that to me is a huge hole. Although, even though we love the merge tool, I think we'd love to see some actual tooling from Microsoft to support that part of the process.
Yeah, and I agree with that. It seems like we're able to kind of automate and be more efficient in the technical upgrade components. But you know, to be honest, the real complexity in any upgrade is assessing what you currently have, what you built, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, and is that still applicable in your business? And I think that's where we find a lot of value in engaging with the customer to really understand if the application or the solution of NAV that they implemented, you know, some time ago is still relevant, and what are the features or the functions that we can actually replace, as Elliot said, with a bit more standard functionality, and how do we approach that differently. So I think there's for sure some efficiency to be gained through automation, but at the same time, there's still some hard work to do with customers to make sure that they understand what their system's really doing, and is it still applicable to their business, and is it applicable to their business moving forward. And I think that's where we're finding a lot of engagement with our customer base for sure.
Yep. Quick question for you, Jeff. As you're working with your customers and having those types of discussions, are you finding customers are perhaps maybe now a little more willing to work with a more standardized process or more standardized pieces of NAV, and then only dropping customizations in where they absolutely have to?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's certainly the desire. Yeah, it's their desire for sure. I think. Well, what we found, we have a kind of robust support model where, you know, we work with customers who don't necessarily have a partner or been trying to do this kind of NAV, I'll call it maintenance or support by themselves, and quite literally, they kind of don't really understand that NAV, although be it super powerful and you can customize the hell out of it, that's also a surefire way to make an upgrade really complex. So I think there's a lot of learning from our customers that the way they did it in the past may not necessarily be the right way. So yeah, there's a real kind of movement, put it that way, to be more standardized and to look at ways to run their business and leverage NAV for what it does best. And customize as little as possible, I guess, is probably the best way to put it. There's still customization that's needed, but typically we would look and help them find either an ISV, for example, or an add-on, you know, that is more standard and really allows them to be on the upgrade path versus a heavily customized option, for sure.
Yeah, I was curious because we see the same thing that. As people look back on where they were with their previous version of NAV and look at moving forward, the same types of things. Are there ISV, you know, can we use base functionality? Is there some ISV functionality we can use in some key areas to get the most out of the system? And
yeah, I think what we're finding is our customers, you know, they that was a big pill to swallow, so to speak, when they implemented. You know, it cost them $100,000 or $250,000, and we work, you know, in mid-sized companies in Canada, and that's a big ticket item. So coming back to them in 4 years and saying, hey, let's do it all over again, that's a really tough conversation. Yeah. So finding ways to be efficient and making the best recommendation moving forward, not just about the implementation, but what is the path that you'd want to get on in order to make the total cost of ownership, reasonable, I think is really where we're finding we're getting into conversations with our clients.
Let me ask you a question with NAV 2013 R2 and maybe what you understand about CREAT. I'm not sure if any of you have anything you can say about it, but does the the architecture of it and the upgrade process look like it will actually improve it once you maybe make the investment to get to for folks who are getting to 2013 R2 right now? Can you say to them it will get easier in future upgrades at this point, or is it still sort of something you're going to have to keep assessing?
Well, we've I think we've been in the Microsoft partner channel long enough to know that we have very little control over what comes from Microsoft. So they may make they have made changes in the past that kind of go off the roadmap, or that seem to make things. They make major changes in the platform from time to time. But right now, we don't have any visibility to that, and I think we have a fairly high degree of commitment from the NAV team to making future upgrades more of an incremental, easy process. So we would never say never, but that's certainly the promise. And my understanding is that they're shifting their focus for development going forward into making NAV more of building touch-ready interfaces for NAV and really focusing on the user experience and the analytics, bringing the power of some of their Power BI and big data capabilities to the product. So I think the shift in terms of future development, we're probably likely to see more new features and capabilities that add power to the existing platform rather than fundamental platform or core application changes. That's certainly the hope.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd say, Jason, I think I would agree with Elliot, and I think it's a mixed bag. If we look at 2013 R2 and the platform changes, it's great if you're a ISV that has a vertical app that you sell into a specific market, and you have all your clients on one version, and every time you update them, you do it all consistently. For that business model, it's great now that we've got a multi-tenant architecture. For those of us who sell across a fairly diverse set of industries and customers, everybody's unique, the infrastructure changes or the architecture changes there alone don't help us much, because we really can't leverage that object store and blast it out to all these attached tenant databases. But I think the PowerShell and scripting, that helps. That'll automate some things that today are manual. What will kill us or hurt us is what we're seeing as we go to upgrade. You've got a client with a number of ISVs, and let's say that we're on, 2013 R2 rollup 7, and you go try to get an ISV. You've got 5 different ISVs. None of them are released on the same rollup. We've had some ISVs say they only intend to support the base release and not the rollups, and that's been a crusher for us.
Sure.
So I think it's a mixed bag. There are things that Microsoft has done which help. If you're an ISV that you basically sell in your own install base, great. For those of us in the real world, somehow we gotta skin this cat, but I don't know that we have the answers yet.
Mm-hmm. I fully agree with that.
There's a question that came in, and maybe this is a good opportunity to maybe start talking about this topic as well, because it does also relate to migration. Ari says, regarding your earlier comment on cloud migration, I believe the actual conversion to true cloud multi-tenant offerings like Azure is limited. People and vendors confuse cloud and hosted NAV in a co-location facility, which is definitely a good point to look at here. And I know, Elliot, you had mentioned something, some of this in terms of really talking about the infrastructure as a service aspect of it in Azure, as opposed to as opposed to other definitions of cloud. Can you expand on that a little bit about your experience with Azure and IaaS as opposed to maybe in comparison with third-party hosting?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, before Azure was really available or as a viable platform for hosting NAV. We had clients who were hosting NAV in third-party data centers, just traditional it probably wasn't called, it was just called hosting then, it wasn't called infrastructure as a service. But we had lots of experiences with clients who didn't have internal infrastructure running NAV on remote infrastructure. The challenges that we had with organizations, hosting companies that weren't specifically devoted to hosting dynamic solutions was that they often couldn't provision servers quick enough, or the responsiveness was an issue, or we run into problems where we'd find out that backups weren't taking place or something like that. And now with Azure, I think we've got something that we just have a much higher degree of confidence and trust in. So it's not that the previous models didn't work. In the end, they did, but Azure is just easy. The dashboards and the controls for spinning up new servers, for managing those servers, for allocating resources to those servers, for managing your implementation are very robust. And now we're starting to see some of the third parties catch up as well. We have a local hosting partner here in Vancouver who has an offering that is virtually identical in some ways to, from a end user point of view, meaning a systems administrator point of view, to Azure. So I think the options are coming along. On the SaaS side, we haven't seen that as much. The true multi-tenant, per user per month pricing. There are some options out there for organizations wanting to run NAV that way, but we were talking about this yesterday. I think all of us here have had the same experience on the partner side, which is that it gets complex very quickly because if you bring ISVs into the mix, once you start factoring in hosting, it's hasn't been as simple as some of the pure cloud offerings out there on the market.
Yeah, and my experience in that is it gets expensive really, really quick as well. So the whole notion of I'm gonna serve out my boxes, I'm gonna reduce my cost and complexity, it actually doesn't necessarily hold true in that world for now at this point in time.
Are you talking about from the perspective of a partner that's gonna do multi-tenant hosting, or are you talking about from the perspective?
Yeah, like you definitely would want to find a company like a SaaS Plaza or something like that does that specific task. But even then, finding ISVs that actually offer that model, right? So you can get NAV in that model, but you might not be able to get your whole NAV solution in that model, and that's kind of where the complexity lies. In addition to that, then all of a sudden now it becomes one of usability too. So you add some complexity on top of it. You might have users that want to access NAV on a web platform. So all of a sudden now there's deployment choices, and it starts to get a little bit more complex really, really quickly. There's not just about one single deployment option now any longer, and additional services and resources need to be added to support a deployment option that maybe wasn't available before, which is great, but it's still quite pricey and complex.
Can any of you think of any vendors, who perhaps on the vertical side who are sort of pushing a multi-tenant NAV-based solution that's cloud-based right now?
I know Serenic has been working on that. I think they're in market with that. Trying to think who I know. Oh shoot!
What about RMI?
Yeah. Now I don't think that's on an Azure or a multi-tenant backbone because they've been doing that for quite a while.
I wasn't sure if they'd migrated over at this stage. Or...
Yeah, I don't know for sure. I know. I think Abacion out of Europe is doing that. So yeah, there are definitely some that are there.
Yeah, not a ton though.
Yeah.
Those who are probably selling they have vertical IP that's bundled into their hosted solution, and they're mostly selling and deploying directly rather than building their own partner model, in my experience.
Yeah. Right.
Go ahead, Jason.
Oh, I was just going to say, I recall from I spoke with some of the leadership at Abacion quite a while back, and they were really building up a practice around cloud support and cloud infrastructure management within their organization as part of their investment there. It's just my recollection, but that does sound familiar.
Yeah, and I would say in reference to Ari's comment about cloud, I think he's absolutely right. I think when we talk about cloud, we actually mix a bunch of things together and refer to it all with the same terminology, because what I always refer back to as kind of my guide is Forrester published what they call their SaaS maturity model. And so, you know, typically in the Microsoft world, when we talk about cloud, we're really just talking about what Forrester would call level 1 maturity, which is hosting.
Yeah. Sure.
You know, and then when you move to level 2, that's where NAV finally is with their multi-tenant infrastructure. But, you know, as we've talked about, that doesn't apply to the lion's share of us, because it's not something that Microsoft is building solutions and a platform around. It's left up to independent, you know, resellers, vendors. When you get to level 3, that's where you'd see like a Microsoft CRM or a Salesforce, you know, kind of what Forrester would call single app SaaS.
Yeah.
And then level 4 would be truly getting to the, you know, the CRM or sales or Force.com model, where you've got a whole platform where you can continue to build apps on top of the platform. So, you know, from an NAV perspective, Ari's completely right. We're typically talking level 1 hosting, some opportunity for level 2. Honestly, I don't know what you guys think. I don't think Microsoft intends to take NAV to a level 3, because that would require them to build the equivalent of a Force.com platform, and I think they want the partners to do that, industry specific, you know, deal with that on their own. I don't see Microsoft doing that. What would you guys say?
I agree with that. I mean, there are a ton of programs now in the market, you know, the R2R programs, RAMP, and so forth, and lots of effort going into encouraging partners to take their IP and deploy it into a multi-tenant cloud solution that they can offer directly. So I absolutely agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're seeing the same thing with some ISVs that we work closely with, in that they're looking at deploying in their own models, or, as you say, building up their level 2 type offering. But it seems to be left to the partners, to the ISVs, that can focus in a specific area with their own IP on top of NAV. So, you know, ISV powered by NAV type of approach.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's also interesting that, you know, of course, there's no roadmap or transition model for organizations that have already invested in a NAV solution and have owned perpetual licenses to transition into a SaaS model. You know, it's really only an option, to the extent it's an option at all, it's really only available to organizations that are just considering an implementation for the first time.
You know what, though, Elliot, we've actually got a couple of our large projects right now with existing clients where they own the licenses, but they're basically at a point where they need a technology refresh. So instead of investing in new on-premise servers, we're working with them to figure out how to move that to Azure. The challenge we're running into there is, I think, less the technology and more the pricing.
Yeah, for sure. That's exactly. Yeah, good point.
Because I think the thing they're most excited about is the elasticity they could get with Azure. You know, we could basically turn off access at night, spin it back up in the morning. They can, you know, they have a peak demand. They can throw additional application servers at it. The challenge in,
There's some customers that will want appreciate the utility pricing and the ability to, you know, manage their efficiency, so to speak. And then you have other partners like OneClick who are evolving level priced models that are hosted on Azure. So clearly there'll be a preference. Some customers in the market will have a preference for utility pricing, and some will have a preference for level pricing.
Yeah, agreed. So for us, where I think we've gotten the most excitement around talking about Azure is the ones who are looking for the utility pricing.
Yeah.
You know, because we haven't historically had elasticity as something we could offer clients. So that's where, they're getting excited, but then the trouble is that they go, hey, I love utility pricing. What's my price going to be?
Yeah, how much is it going to be every month?
Yeah, well, yeah.
You're going to leave your lights on it? Yeah.
That's right.
A couple of things to just jump in here with. One, Paul noted that Serenic is running on Azure, both in single and multi-tenant. I know that came up a minute ago, so thanks for the clarification on that. Yeah, someone asks, do we know if Europe is maybe ahead of the U.S. in adopting a cloud? Do you guys have any sense of that? I mean, I know we're all here.
Oh, I think yes, just because we have an inferiority complex, and we're convinced they're smarter anyways. So I just have to assume they're ahead.
I throw that open to anyone in the audience as well if you have any opinions.
Yeah, we went to the NAV Directions conference in EMEA in Vienna last year, and my sense was that there were some partners there, some UK partners that I had talked to, who'd already done something like 40 or 50 Azure migrations or deployments, and they seemed, from my perspective, to be further ahead, just anecdotally. Not really sure if how far along they were, but there was certainly a lot more excitement and a lot more. I remember being in a room while we were pricing out an Azure deal, and we'd never even seen the pricing at that point. So my sense is that they're further ahead.
Interesting. And another related point is, at least with the level one, as Greg mentioned, the infrastructure hosting. There is now a choice, right, for customers to stay with perpetual licensing versus SPLA or subscription licensing. And what's the preference there? Are people trending more towards subscription options if they're given the choice?
Jeff, I think we always get asked about different options for sure. But I think this gets back to the realities and practicalities of it. And that is, we can certainly find SPLA-based licensing for now, but it's not an all-in-one package, right? We have to look at then what ISPs come along and offer SPLA-based pricing or subscription-based pricing. In addition to that, there's a hosting layer, that now we have to look at as well. So what's happening, at least in our experience, I think, is as soon as we look at SPLA-based pricing, it gets complex quickly. It also gets pricey very quickly because all of a sudden we're not just looking at a bundled price. It's actually 4 or 5 different components that all add up to kind of one monthly fee. And that monthly fee, then as soon as the client does the math, it's kind of like 1.5 years. I'm better off just buying a license and a server. Like it's a really kind of non-compelling story at this point in time, at least from our experience. So I think there's a lot of interest. There just hasn't been a lot of uptake because I don't think it's been kind of bundled properly, and we haven't really operationalized it quite right in the channel.
I'd agree with Jeff. I mean, I think the challenge when we're competing against a true cloud provider like a NetSuite or an Intact, well, maybe not Intact so much, more like a NetSuite, where they control the price end to end, including infrastructure. It's much simpler for them to get to your all-in monthly subscription price, where for us, not being the publisher of both the base product, the ISV products, the infrastructure backend, by the time we put all those pieces together and all the middlemen and intermediaries that are part of that process, we as the value-added reseller have so little control over that end price point that it's not compelling. So we're often better off just saying, hey, here's the on-premise price, and if we need to deal with a cash flow stream of this, we can finance it out. And that seems to be, unfortunately, as much as I think we'd all love to get there, with the current model as it exists today, the model would fundamentally have to change.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And you're exactly right about the financing option. You want a monthly fee, we can finance it, but we can't actually offer you, what exactly you were looking for, and that's a subscription-based service in the cloud where there's no infrastructure really at all.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about the re-implementation versus upgrade question a little bit more. It's certainly an interesting topic because I think it starts to speak to the options that customers might have in doing this kind of thing. Elliot, what about I know there's something you guys have been thinking a lot about. So where do you feel like our trend is going on that re-implement versus upgrade?
Yeah, it's interesting. We started to evolve a bit of a framework and methodology for answering that question. Our approach to evaluating scoping and upgrade is probably not different than Greg or Andrew's. What we're finding is that once we get a clear understanding of the degree of customization in a customer's environment, I mean, there's a couple of questions. One is, how old is the current deployment? If it's NAV 2009, there's probably a better chance for a technical upgrade and less of a case for a re-implementation, although there are significant exceptions. If it's, for example, if there were a NAV 2009 environment that included some badly ported customizations from previous versions, or if the business had changed significantly since 2009 it rolled out and there were new needs or a requirement to revisit the dimension structure. So there's a bunch of sort of changes in the business or potentially a poorly functioning 2009 environment that could suggest a re-implementation would be better because you get a cleaner, fresher solution when you redeploy that way. But again, the older the version, if we're coming from NAV version 5 or older, if we're dealing with an environment where there were extensive customizations that are potentially no longer needed, or where those customizations could be replaced by out-of-the-box NAV or out-of-the-box ISV capabilities, we can get into a situation pretty quickly where the cost to re-implement, the effort involved are less than doing an upgrade, and the result would be a much cleaner and stable solution. The downside is, there's always a big decision about data migration. When you re-implement, you can start with opening balances or port as much history as you want, but that's when costs can go up to do that. And what we're finding is that most companies want, at most a year. They want to archive the old data, make it available, but the most they seem to want is about a year's worth of history. So re-implement turns out to be a great option lots of times because it's an opportunity to have sort of a fresh start. You don't have to go through everything you went through in the initial implementation because you already know NAV, you know how it works for your business.
Yeah, I'd add to that too. I think what we're seeing is we're getting a lot of interest in upgrades as well, simply because the technology has shifted so much. There's much more demand for bring your own device. I want to see my sales orders on my tablet or on my phone. And in order to get that simple request, we definitely need a technology shift. We need to look at a different platform. But the technology and the demands of the customer and even how business works today versus 4 or 5 years ago has shifted tremendously. So that really allows and even starts to bring in the conversation. Well, we should look at re-implementing because the architecture of these solutions are way different. The openness of NAV now and how we connect to web services, et cetera, allows us to do these kind of things that you really want to do. So it may not be a fundamental, rip and replace, but certainly it would look something like, let's take what you currently have that is working really well, but also let's expand that footprint, let's get you up to date on the technology so you can actually operate in today's world. And that's ultimately where a lot of our kind of conversations are going. So it becomes re-implement, basically.
Yeah, no, we're finding it one of the significant drivers too is technology and the need and ability to take your solution and, as you say, get it out to the handheld devices, get it out to the shop floor, or get the data back from the shop floor, or have vendor portals available where vendors can supply information in advance of deliveries or pick up their purchase orders and all of that type of interfacing. And in the past, we might have had a request or something like that in an environment, and that's sure you can deal with a single request, but now it's a vendor portal today, and now it's a customer portal or a buying portal for tomorrow. and a quality portal and a food safety portal and so on. And that does drive the technology. And once you have the infrastructure, those projects, and at least the way they integrate with NAV, become much smaller, much easier to deal with. And it makes the businesses more agile.
For sure. That's definitely what we're finding.
Interesting. So the those sort of industry needs or needs to keep up with some of those technology changes are driving the need to get up to the newer technology more quickly to support them. Cool. Someone mentioned R2R earlier, and I just wanted to kind of check in on that a little bit more to get your impression. You know, if you're a customer, an NAV customer or a prospect right now, you know, what is what does it really mean for you know, if you're working with a partner and they're doing the R2R program, or they're using, I guess, RAMP to change the way they approach implementations. I mean, what I don't know if any of you are involved in it, but what do you think the customer would actually be seeing or prospect if they're working with that kind of partner?
Well, I mean, we've been part of R2R. I would say that a customer sees nothing, right? It really has nothing to do with existing NAV customers. Prospects, well, it would be pretty, there wouldn't be much that prospects would see other than the whole RAMP and R2R is Microsoft wanting partners to shift their business models to focus industry specific and go down market with more out-of-the-box templated implementations. So any given prospect, if they were a RAMP or GR2R prospect, wouldn't know anything different. They would just have a partner approaching, okay, here's our kind of cookie cutter approach to implementing you, versus the typical bespoke or custom approach we might apply to somebody with very unique business needs. So from a prospect and customer standpoint, I don't think they see anything. It's really all behind the scenes, business models, partner driven, Microsoft driven.
Oh,
yeah. We all jump in at the same time. So at this point too, I think the other thing that does happen is with the RAMP and the R2R models, do they see a difference? No, but they don't necessarily put an R2R project up against a conventional project. But what they do get, and this is benefit and sort of value, is they do get a faster implementation. Fewer consulting services, faster time to return on investment, but they have to work with standardized, as Greg said, templates, standardized functionality or configurable functionality. So you do have choice, you just don't have as much choice because you don't include customization in your options. For smaller customers, though, that don't want to be spending hundreds of hours on consulting fees, that starts to become a more viable option for them. But what happens is, as you start to take that model and take it back upscale in terms of user counts or size and complexity of the organization, is as the organizations get bigger, they have distinctive things that they do that they require customizations of. Whether it be business processes that have been developed and honed over an extended period of time, or things that they've identified as competitive advantages that they need reflected in NAV. So it is a tool to go after these smaller customers, to be able to implement them faster, implement more per year, and get a common code base out there, which does start to fit with the automation tools, the multi-tenancy, and it sort of helps to bring all of that together. And that's where R2R and RAMP as programs that Microsoft has brought forward to the partners supports where they're headed in terms of NAV as a platform or NAV as a repetitive implementation product. Now that really, I think, only holds true in the vertical marketplaces, the vertical ISVs.
Yeah, I agree, Andrew. I think I could further. I think what we see, especially dealing with small customers, that just because they're small doesn't mean they don't have complex businesses or even high demand. And so one of the I'd say challenges that we have dealing with more templatized or standardized implementation for small customers is to be sure that they understand that they understand what to expect at the end of this. Like I know that in many cases, customers still want to be able to, as we just discussed, have the ability to have a portal and have the ability to extend NAV, et cetera, et cetera. They may not get there initially, but at the same time, they still have that demand and that vision. So it becomes a bit of a challenge, I think, to ensure that yes, we are efficient, we are respecting budgets for smaller clients, but at the same time, putting them onto at least a platform that they can scale and grow, and that they understand where the initial implementation will lead them at the end of the day as well. And I find that takes quite a bit of time and effort to actually to talk to the smaller clients, to educate them about this, because even all that kind of software literature says, oh, you can do X, Y, and Z and change the world with your software. So you have to be really clear about what it is the implementation is going to do and what it's not going to do as well.
I would just a final comment on that I would add is that I think that time will tell to some extent. I think what Jeff is saying is exactly right. Like today, the average client wants cheap, but they also want customization, and those two things don't go together very well long term. I think there's quite a lot of thinking and research and literature that's sort of suggesting that customers are also getting tired of increasing complexity with enterprise software, and that they're in growing numbers starting to accept just good enough capabilities for running their businesses, which suggests that maybe 3-4 years from now, the mindset will have shifted and there'll be more of an openness to accepting standardized functionality. And if Microsoft's investment in the partner community pays off and there's a proliferation of vertical solutions that are designed specifically with the needs of certain end user organizations in mind, that those could be very successful strategies. But I don't think we'll know for a little while yet. Because I don't think the options are really there. I think partners are just starting to wrap their head around making this transition from being pure services and implementation companies to being a combination of having a software offering and providing services around them. So I think that'll be something we'll want to monitor for a couple of years.
We have a question. John asks, the customers find when they're looking at upgrading that they often don't know what has been modified and what is based in NAV, and if so, what processes do you use to address that other than a code dive? You're nodding your head there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we find that all the time, that customers, especially if we are working with clients that we haven't worked with before and they're in an upgrade position, that they actually don't know what they built. And to be honest, it's fairly natural. The reason why there's always turnover in client organizations, people that started with the implementation may have left. But the reality is the business would have changed as well. So there's very often functionality that is either used, worked around, or actually people don't even know it's there, that's operating in the background, and they think that that's just NAV, but in fact it's not. So the process really, as we discussed, is work through a bit of a merge tool so you understand what's available, what customizations really are, and then kind of work through a bit of an audit. Say, okay, well, here's what this customization is with the customer. Do you really use it or not? We kind of pick our way through a laundry list of items and kind of do a bit more forensic kind of analysis to figure out what these customizations are, and then work with the customer to understand if it's useful or not useful, or if they want to take it forward, and or they're using it.
Sometimes we find ISV functionality that was deployed originally that hasn't been upgraded, so we end up with a decision point. If we can upgrade core NAV, but this ISV component may still be important. We're dealing with this right now with one customer. The ISV hasn't updated that solution, so they may have to develop their own customization, move that functionality off to another platform like CRM, or just hold off on upgrading.
Yeah.
And back to the question about evaluating code, that goes back to comments that were made earlier in the call regarding using a tool called Merge Tool, where there is a code comparison done between a current database, the base version of that database, and then comparing that with the go-to version, whether that be 2013 or whatever, highlighting where the differences are so that you've got an objective place to start in your evaluation. But that's just purely code, and that doesn't consider, as Jeff brought up, employee turnover, changes to the business process, the evolution of the business, and in that there may be code that is just no longer utilized. It was put in place to address a specific need. That need went away, so they stopped using the code.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I think we have one more. There's one more topic that I thought was worth touching on, and maybe we use that as we sort of start to wrap up here, because we're getting about 10 minutes to the top of the hour. Greg, you mentioned as we were getting started here today, thinking about the next generation. What were you thinking about there? Are we dealing with an aging NAV professional community?
Yeah, I mean, hey, just look at this. Well, actually, Jason, you still look really good. But there's a lot of gray hair going on in this community, myself included, and I think it's a challenge. I mean, we're looking at the average age now. People in the community be in the mid to late 40s, approaching early 50s. And I mean, if we think back to what happened in the market with right after Y2K, when most of us, I'm sure, in the run-up to Y2K got involved in this business, it was cool. We were all young. Boy, what a difference 15 years makes. But you look at it now, and we had the dot-com bust, we had 9/11, then we've gone through in the last decade a period of mild recoveries leading to deep recession and then crawling our way back out of that for the last several years. So it's no wonder that we haven't seen people invest in, training the next generation, but it's not too long out there, and I'd say it's not unique to NAV. I mean, I see this in other ERP platforms and in technology in general. It just hasn't been the cool place to be in a while. None of us have done a good job of bringing the next generation. So it's something we all got to think about.
Yeah.
And and John, I see, hey, in your Q&A, you've got your hair tinted. So, I'm not saying we can't buy time. But,
yeah, we're noticing a lot of, just to that demographics question in the partner community. There's a lot of here where we are, in the Pacific Northwest, there's been a ton of consolidation in the partner channel in the last 2 to 3 years. We see as guys who've been running boutique consulting services businesses, the guys who are running Dynamics VARs are starting to think about their golden years. They're selling their businesses, and so we've seen quite a bit of roll-up activity, and the result is that there are fewer players where we operate, but there are a couple of bigger ones now. So, those demographics are changing, and certainly from a talent point of view, what we've noticed for probably the last 5 years is that, in the pools that we reach into when we are hiring consultants, if we just go out looking for people if we want people with direct hands-on experience with the platform, there's a finite pool of people, and they probably work with every partner in town, and probably, yeah, I guess you experienced that too. So, we really have to reach out a little further, and we've had some success digging into the local MBA programs and kind of recruiting out of directly out of business school and finding people with accounting and MIS backgrounds, and then giving them an opportunity to train on NAV. Or the second place we're finding younger resources with experience is reaching into the client base. Not necessarily our clients, but we found those make them happy. But we've had some great consultants come out of the industry side as well.
Yeah,
we had to.
Yeah, talent stuff, especially in the Pacific Northwest Europe. I mean, Sony with the big FX shop is coming to town. So I think what we're finding as well is that we're competing with kind of the hotter, cooler jobs and the cooler kids, where they want to take FX jobs, or they want to work in a kind of a service based or an app based environment versus a business consulting, basically is what we're doing with deploying technology. So we're competing with a really kind of cool talent pool as well, and to find people, and so it's, I don't know, it's tough to find good people, put it that way. It always has.
We work with a partner out of the Netherlands, an ISV we work closely with, and they've taken a bit of a novel approach in terms of putting together a training program. So they do recruit people straight out of college or university, and they've been bringing about between 5 and 8 people through their program each year. It runs for about 5 to 6 months. They pay people a per diem to attend the program, and at the end of it, they make the decision on who to hire. And typically, they hire about 5 people a year, and they're at the point where they're in their organization that they're about 25% of their people are now people that they've trained over the course of the last 5 years. So that represents a tremendous infusion of new blood, people that don't have ERP experience, that they've been able to bring up to speed, and they run a very formalized training process. It's an approach they've taken that's different than going out and finding people through other partners, people that have specific NAV skills that have worked with everyone else, but they've found that to be tremendously effective.
Well, and we just started this summer. It's still an experiment, so I can't report back to you how well it's worked. But we started an internship program this summer with the University of Minnesota. So we've currently got 7 interns going through a 3-week boot camp, business analysis, project management, dev, and consulting. And then at the end, for the remaining 9 weeks of the summer, our goal is to get them on client site. So we'll see how well it works. One of the things that's just been amazing, even in the boot camp, is we can give them an assignment, and they just do it. And I'm like, wait a minute. I didn't have to spend 30 minutes convincing you why this was a good idea and why I even had the right to tell you to go try this. So it's been a blast. So
Pleasantly surprising. Cool. We had a question come in, and Elliot, feel free to, and Jeff, feel free to jump back in. I muted your mic, so I was getting some feedback. I think it was coming from you guys. But so someone asked, are you seeing people wanting to use NAV with Dynamics CRM as opposed to using the CRM capabilities of NAV, and what challenges has that brought for you guys?
I'd say absolutely. We're seeing the drive to using Dynamics CRM, oftentimes for a Salesforce, people that don't necessarily need to get in and touch transactional data in the system. Challenges, just initially data structure. The data models are different. Once you understand what you want to accomplish and you understand where your master data exists, it's fairly straightforward from that point on.
Well, and I think, Jason, what we're seeing is probably an equal interest in Salesforce.com as well as Microsoft CRM, because really now it's so easy to connect to NAV, whether you use a Jitterbit or a Scribe, or I forget, Dell even has their own middle tier.
Boomi.
Yeah, Boomi. I think that the wave of the future is no more everything has to be brand name Microsoft. It's what's the best app for the business I'm running, and where most of the things we're doing now are cloud-based. We're just in a different world where it's easier to connect kind of the best app for the job. So I don't know, what are you guys seeing? Do you see a lot of Salesforce.com stuff?
We do a lot. Well, we have a Microsoft Dynamics CRM practice as well. So we do see Salesforce for sure. I think the reality that we see is we're in kind of a it's what's the use case, and that's how kind of CRM shows up versus CRM for now. Where now it's kind of fairly lightweight in terms of CRM. A lot of the times we have more very specific and robust marketing requirements or customer service-based requirements in a call center, or creating work orders from some sort of service offering, where a CRM application actually works a lot better. You can track communication and the compliance And then if there's any financial transactions, we can simply integrate that financial piece back to NAV to track what the transactional elements are. But really, when we see CRM show up, it's because of the use case, and we decide if it's NAV or CRM because of that. Prime example is, do you want to just place orders either through a portal that goes directly into NAV, and you don't really have to track communication, you don't really have to build an opportunity base or anything like that, just standing orders from a distribution type company. That's probably a really good use case for NAV CRM, but in the case of Microsoft CRM, there might be more about marketing, there might be more about service. You have a need for compliance, you have a need for like activity tracking, and of course you have a Salesforce that you want to track and manage. And then that might be a better case for Salesforce or for Microsoft CRM, something like that. So we see those scenarios all the time, but it is specifically about how you're going to be using the solution, and then what is the best solution, and what is your IT strategy, and what's your budget. A number of factors come into it.
And you asked specifically about CRM, but it also now means that we our customers are also starting to look at best of breed other external applications that you wouldn't traditionally go ahead and consider. And you're now considering because of the connectivity. We open this up now, and it does make that whole process that much easier. So it is a fundamental shift as well, where people, depending on the requirements and budgets and use cases and constraints, will look at external applications and then integrate that or tie that back into NAV.
Excellent. Well, I see we're at the top of the hour here. Guys, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My computer is sort of half crashed as Andrew was talking there, so I may have lost the ability to sort of cleanly end this session. But I didn't really want to thank. Oh, I think I'm back. Great. But I really want to thank you guys for taking the time to talk today, and we even opened a few questions that I think we could jump into sometime down the road on, on some of these Azure decisions, on some of the infrastructure as a service stuff, and pricing, on really a lot of things. And I know there's going to be more news and more information coming up through the summer and into the fall, so it should be an interesting time to maybe connect again, huh?
Absolutely.
Sounds great.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
yeah, thanks for, and I'm gonna close by putting up everyone's contact information. If there's anything you want to follow up on here, I'm trying to just regain control of the screen, but you can see Greg, Andrew, Elliot, and Jeff. I'm sure they'd all be happy to take any questions, any follow-ups that you might have. So today we did record the session. You'll see a little survey at the end if you're in the audience. We'd really appreciate any feedback on how we can make these sessions even better in the future. With a group of panelists like this, I'm not sure that's possible, but we can always try. So thanks a lot, and we're going to end it there.
Cool.
Hey, Greg, Andrew, Elliot, Jeff, yeah. Thanks. Have a great day.
Have a good one. See you guys around.
Bye.